welcome to our final Deep and Meaningful at MOD. We are the Museum of Discovery, and we are looking at the intersection between science and art. If you want to visit us in the future when we reopen, you can come and find us in Adelaide on the corner of North Terrace adjacent to Morfett Street Bridge. My name is Debbie, and I am joined today by Samuel. Say hello, Samuel.
Hello, Samuel.
He's an extremely funny person. We're the only two people in the museum today, so it's exciting that we can still bring you in and kind of have a look at the depth behind some of the science of our exhibition. Our current exhibition is called 7 Siblings from the Future. You can come into the museum, usually, meet these 7 siblings, and make some of the decisions they might have to make in their hypothetical world. The person we're going to meet at the moment is Alex, so let's have a chat with Alex.
Hey, great. I've been waiting all morning for somebody to get here. I've recently discovered that my great-grandmother hacked a health monitoring device a few months just before she died. But I still don't know why. Her and I used to have so much fun together, and I would always let her win playing poker. Sorry, I just have to check this. There's a small problem. I need to contact the patient.
Oh, what's going on now? I like to speculate that somebody has had a spastic colon. That's my vote.
That is a difficult situation.
Oh, okay. What was I saying? Right. I'm beginning to wonder if maybe somehow she was depressed or trying to hide signs of dementia. Could you go to her house and investigate? Some of her old stuff is still there. See if you could find out why she would stop using her health monitoring device. I have to go now, but good luck.
Okay, so we are invited into Great-Grandma Cheryl's house to see why she might have decided not to continue having her health monitored in her final years. So let's come on through. This is Great-Grandmother Cheryl's. Looks like maybe a combination of a few different rooms in her house. But if you want to go through this activity, we can look at things like Grandma's diary, we can listen to some phone messages from her doctor in order to establish why she might have decided not to be continued monitoring in her final years. If you want to see us do that, you can jump onto the MOD website and see our live stream of our full tour that goes for about an hour, and you can see us interacting with these things, having fun, and trying to figure out what exactly happened. I'm not going to bring you through all of that right now, but I do think that talking about Alex is a really important topic for us right now. Alex is a nurse in 2050, which means the way that they view health is completely different to the way we view health. One of the things that Alex specifically works with is constant monitoring of their patients. So for example, they have this little device right here that all of the patients can wear. This is called the Gero Vivo, so it is specifically used for the elderly to make sure that we are constantly monitoring their health. It might be something that's similar to or much more advanced than something like a Fitbit now, which is constantly monitoring things like our pulse and levels of fitness, how many steps we're doing today, but significantly more advanced. It also means instead of being the ones to monitor it themselves, Alex or other nurses like them are monitoring it for people like Great-Grandmother Cheryl. So you can have a little look at the types of things Grandma Cheryl might have been doing on a daily basis.
Impressive amount of forest walking there.
I wish I could walk in the forest that much, that'd be good. So if we're bringing it to the context of now and how the future of medicine will change for us based on what we know now, we're obviously going to be looking at the fact that we are currently in a global pandemic. Coronavirus has hit us really hard, which means we've had to go into a state of emergency in almost every country in the world. The reasons for this are because coronavirus, or the current virus a strain that is going around at the moment, is called SARS-CoV-2. That means severe acute respiratory syndrome, SARS-CoV, coronavirus, COV. It's called coronavirus because under a microscope it looks a lot like a crown, and crown in Latin is corona. But you will notice that it says strain 2. So where was strain 1? Where was SARS-CoV-1? Around about 2003, there was another epidemic of SARS. This is something people might be more familiar with. However, it had a much higher death rate in terms of the fatality of people who caught it. Our current strain of coronavirus is a little bit different in that because it has a long incubation period, meaning it has a long time before symptoms start exhibiting. It could be beyond 3 to 5 days when people start noticing the symptoms of coronavirus. It means people can go out and about on their daily walks and come into contact with other people. The virus can then spread to people quite quickly without them even knowing that they're sick. It's a particularly difficult virus to come across and to stop because unlike things like the flu or influenza, instead of it being a human-born type of disease, or at the moment, having such a long history of influenza in humans means that the human body is much more easily able to recognize that virus and do the things to get rid of it. With SARS, it's animal-born, which means the virus mutated in some form of animal and jumped over to humans. That can happen for a little bit, only from animal to human, until it mutates again and starts being able to transmit from human to human. Some of the estimated stats around this are that it was being transferred from animal to human for about 2 weeks before the virus was able to mutate to transfer from human to human. 3 months later, we are in a global pandemic. When it comes to looking at these things, that's really interesting because it means we saw that people were starting to contract and eventually die of coronavirus in China, and China was able to go and shut the areas that were affected down with a full lockdown. This is really scary for people who are involved in it, but it's actually the best form of prevention that we can have. Coronavirus, or especially the second strain, SARS-CoV-2, is very, very new to us. We don't know what it is. We don't know where it comes from. We don't have a vaccine. We're still currently learning about it. That makes it extremely difficult to control. Historically, the best form of control of a quickly spreading virus is social distancing. So you can see Samuel and I are 1.5 meters apart at least. We're actually more than that. I think we're about 2 meters apart. It also means staying home when you don't need to go out. We're currently the only 2 people in the museum, so hopefully we're not going to come in contact with people, and we're cleaning everything down really fast. Another form of prevention when it comes to this is washing your hands quite regularly. You'll see a lot of people have bought hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer kills bacteria really well, but when it comes to viruses, soap is a lot better at controlling these viruses. That's because a virus exists or lives inside a small complex that the outside is made from a lipid or a type of fat, such as oil. It's not an oil, but it's like oil. So when we go to clean our bowl of spaghetti at the end of the day, because obviously we all do the dishes, if we run it under water without soap, that oil doesn't move away. When we use soap, it literally breaks those oils apart and helps them dissolve in water. When it comes to coronavirus, if it's inside that little lipid complex, that fat complex, the soap and detergent wrenches that apart, which destroys the body of the virus so it can no longer transmit from person to person outside of the cell. That's why it's so important to wash your hands. Please remember that. However, if we are looking at spread from person to person, coronavirus touching things means that you are able to put the virus onto a surface. Somebody else coming to that surface may be able to touch it. However, if we're looking at the control of these kind of viruses, maybe the situation of what is happening with Alex and constantly monitoring people's device or health, biological health, is going to get us into a stage where we might be able to identify these issues earlier. So currently, with our forms of identification, somebody has to actually report it to the World Health Organization as an observation to say, hey, somebody's got pneumonia. Usually that will be doctors or medical staff who will report it based on information in their area. However, if we can monitor people's health all the time, we might be able to see when this virus mutated, when it transferred from animals to humans, and then when it mutated to transfer from human to human. We would be able to monitor things like temperature, for example. Fever is one of the common side effects, or one of the common symptoms of COVID-19. And so a lot of countries have employed tactics where they measure the temperature of different people as they go into stores to make sure that everyone going in doesn't have a fever. It's just one of the early signs. However, if we are able to detect that from a central place, such as Alex, who is working with multiple patients, not only would we be able to control the flow of people and say, okay, please don't go out, it looks like you need to go in quarantine, but we might also be able to come and learn different things about where that person went and where this virus may have started from. So it's a little bit of a strange thing when we're thinking in the future of people constantly monitoring our health all of the time. But maybe in their world they will be able to deal with the kind of pandemics that we're currently going through a lot earlier because they're always looking at our health. I think that's a strange concept, but it does bring up a lot of questions. So if we're looking at the ethics, like medical ethics, do people want to actually be monitored all the time? It's a bit of a different thing having your Fitbit and looking at it yourself and getting advice straight away for yourself. Usually would go into the doctor and ask them for advice, and by doing that we're consenting. But is it a different thing when we're saying, can you please watch what I'm doing every stage of my day?
Well, yeah, Benny's pointed out that the monitoring people when they're healthy rather than just when something goes wrong would be really helpful right now, which you've sort of discussed
exactly
in depth.
And that is a really good point, because it goes into different philosophies when it comes to medicine. There is trying to cure a disease that's already there, and then there's trying to prevent a disease or some sort of condition. So this is employed very heavily within dentistry. Preventative dental care might be something that you've heard about, where different methods are employed in order to prevent cavities from happening, as opposed to just fixing them when they come along. Brushing your teeth is one of these, flossing. All of those techniques go into trying to prevent future cavities. In the case of coronavirus, we only started to do something about it when we already knew it was there. So monitoring healthy people might be a preventative way of doing it. I can't really say what will happen in the future of how vast our technology will be to be able to go in and specifically identify what kind of RNA is entering our body in viral form. But it does open up that whole idea of what medical ethics is. Because even if we're looking, for example, at grandmother Cheryl, she specifically chose not to be monitored in her final days, which Alex doesn't understand. There is this cross-generational dissonance where Grandma Cheryl would have grown up in a world like now where, no, we don't want to be monitored all the time. There has been talk about monitoring people's phone use to see, using GPS systems to make sure that we're not going out during our lockdowns, to make sure people are actually staying at home so it can be enforced martially. Is that a breach of our own privacy? And is it too much constant over monitoring? Clearly Grandma Cheryl didn't want to be monitored in this time, whether it was to prevent knowledge about something like depression or dementia, or whether it was just because they wanted to live their life happily, we don't really know. But Alex, growing up in a world where this type of thing is completely normal, in fact it's their job to do it, they just don't understand why anyone would choose not to do this. So we're going into the cultural psychology as well, and that social idea of what is acceptable and what is not in the medical industry. It was only not very long ago where people believed that in vitro fertilization was unethical. It was unethical to create new embryos within a test tube, as people would say, as test tube babies. And a lot of people were really, really unhappy with this kind of thing. But now in our society, it's seen as a completely normal and valid option for anybody who does want to have a baby but is struggling with infertility issues. What are you trying to say to me? I can see you're trying to say something.
I suppose even prior to the coronavirus outbreak, the questions of health monitoring with the government introducing My Health Record, I think it was about 2 years ago.
It wasn't long ago.
And that more ease of information sharing. So it's been a question even before the coronavirus outbreak.
I am a geneticist, and I remember...
Humble brag there.
It's not a brag, it's relevant, I promise. I remember when there was a lot of talk about taking a genetic fingerprint of babies when they were born in order to keep a record of them, so that we had a record of everybody in case people committed crimes and things like that, but also to test for different diseases and things associated with genetic conditions. However, a lot of people were very against that because they thought that knowledge could be abused. So it hasn't been implemented in Australia. This isn't something that happens. Maybe in Ukalara in 2050 it's just the norm. Maybe that kind of thing is part of this preventative healthcare, making sure we identify different genetic conditions. Currently, if you want to be genetically tested, it is still an opt-in kind of thing. So when we're looking at those medical ethics once again, if we give our consent to be constantly monitored, can we revoke that consent, or is it already there? These are the kind of things that Alex is really getting into the nitty-gritty of. I genuinely believe that in the future we're going to have so much medical knowledge that we don't have now. There quite possibly could be this kind of monitoring. Whether that's really useful because it prevents things like pandemics, but at the same time it's a breach of our own privacy. Those are questions that we need to answer, not only medical professionals, but as a society as well. We need to have in mind whether we are okay with this kind of monitoring. I think being in our current global pandemic is one of the situations where people might be more happy to give up some of those rights of freedom in order to contain something. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, of course I'll stay at home. I'm totally happy to stay at home. Other times we would have seen that as a breach of freedom. So what does that mean for the future? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But that was Alex in a nutshell. So thank you very much for visiting us today. If you want to see a full tour of the museum, you can go onto the MOD website, and we go around and we interact with everything and do all of the activities. That takes about an hour. There are also about 20-minute little deep and meaningfuls of each of the siblings specifically as well. So if you have a specific area of science you're really interested in, pop on that, find the sibling that's most appropriate, and hopefully you learn something else. So hopefully, that was my last deep and meaningful of our current tour of the whole exhibition. Maybe we'll see in the future what happens, and we'll have more then, maybe not, I don't know. But hopefully you have a lovely day and join us at launch tonight. So thank you very much.
And launch starts at
4 p.m. Adelaide time. So we're very excited about that. Thank you.
Whoops.